Roach. I represent the Texas Trial Lawyers Association, and we are respectfully speaking against the bill. We have three concerns about the bill as it is currently written. Our first concern is with the definition of operator. We think the current committee substitute has improved that definition by adding both the owner and the manufacturer as the operator. I think that's a very good idea in the case of a situation like Uber or Lyft, where you have a large, sophisticated corporate owner who probably will be working hand in hand, perhaps, with somebody that's developing this technology. Where we think there might be an unintended consequence is the situation when the owner is, instead of being a corporate owner like Lyft or Uber or perhaps FedEx or something like that, a consumer. And under those circumstances, if a consumer who is only the person that pushes the button and tells the car where to go, if the vehicle then runs a red light under this definition, that person would be the one who would get the ticket for doing that. And that person, and if the vehicle got into an accident, that person, that consumer, could end up being held responsible civilly, and we think that's an unintended consequence of the bill. The second concern that we have about the bill is the insurance requirement. The insurance requirement, we think, is good if the owner of the vehicle is, for example, Uber or Lyft, because the insurance requirements are high for the owner under those circumstances. The insurance requirement also is fine if, to the extent it is a fully capitalized manufacturer like General Motors or something like that. The concern that we have is that if there is no other than minimum limits requirement is in the case of an undercapitalized corporation that's attempting to develop a autonomous vehicle, and that there wouldn't be, under those circumstances, funds to compensate somebody in the event of an accident. I would point out that in California, the hearings in California, 40 stakeholders testified at the hearing there, and all of them said that there was that a $5 million insurance requirement would not impede or slow down the development of autonomous vehicle capability. The final concern we have is the liability section. We are concerned about the situation that Senator Hall referenced, and that is hacking. Under the current language, there is no provision that indicates that a manufacturer has an obligation to take reasonable care to prevent hacking. That could, we know that all systems, computer systems, are capable of being hacked by a variety of sources. And we think that is a limitation. We believe that the common law is more than adequate and more than sufficient to allocate responsibility. 2 days ago, one of the chief executives at General Motors, in the handout that I gave to you, said that they agree that the common law is capable of allocating liability, and that's what we believe. And I will answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Were y'all represented in the work group?
Yes, we were.
Okay. Did you bring proposed language solutions to Senator Hancock?
I don't know that we brought language, Senator. I can't say that.
Okay.
No.
Okay. No. Okay.
I had some questions.
Senator Rodriguez.
Of this witness. I too am concerned about, like Senator Hall, about the liability here and the manufacturer under this provision, it seems, not being held liable, in particularly cases in modifications by other persons. I think this gentleman just testified about how all kinds of things can go wrong with these. And I'm all for innovation, and I think this is probably the future. But in terms of providing adequate protection and ensuring that appropriate fault is attributed. It seems to me Senator Hall and I are concerned with hacking.
I think Senator Hancock's willing to address.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real clear, because we're getting very confused about the liability provisions in here. What this says very clearly is if it's altered, if somebody comes in and changes it from its original, then the liability clause kicks in. That there is, I mean, that's all it's saying. And so if somebody else comes in and changes it, that's when it comes in. In other words, if you come in and manipulate it, you do something to negatively impact its operational functions, then no longer is the manufacturer that established that operator system liable because you've altered it in some way. And so that's where it is. So I don't think you've got the problems that you think you have based on the language in the bill.
So in all other circumstances, other than the one you just described, the manufacturer could be held liable.
It simply addresses the fact that if alterations are made, they're not liable.
Yeah. Let me ask you then, Mr. Nelson, wrote some questions about that. If a person gets into this vehicle and pushes a button, in there, and the computer fails to recognize a red light, for example, and the car runs a red light and it hits the large family, under this bill, who would be responsible?
Well, under the bill, it would be both the owner and it would be the manufacturer. And if the owner is Uber or the owner is Lyft or the owner is FedEx, that makes sense because it's probable that they've participated in developing the technology. Mm-hmm. But if the owner is Senator Nichols and Senator Nichols didn't work on it, then that would not, in our opinion, be a proper allocation of responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And we define owner in there, so you probably ought to go back and look at the definition of owner that we provide within the legislation, because that example would not apply.
Well, my understanding is that the definition of owner is the definition. It's number 19 in the definition sections in the code, and that is the record title holder of the vehicle. So if Uber is the record title holder of the vehicle, Uber would be responsible. But if Senator Nichols is the record title owner of the vehicle and it's a consumer vehicle, then Senator Nichols is the owner under that definition.
Well, let me take this a little further with regard to the hacking that we're concerned about. If the manufacturer fails to take responsibility or the steps to prevent hacking, and let's say instead of the scenario that Senator Hall had, I'm talking about a terrorist, does it, and the terrorist hacks the program and the car mows down 50 people down Congress Avenue. Would the manufacturer be liable under those circumstances in this bill?
No, and there's numerous ways that computer technology can be hacked. One of the ways it can be hacked is with a worm. And a worm is a piece of software that goes in and invades like a virus, the piece of software. And we've seen this happen time and time again. We've seen the North Koreans do it. We've seen Al-Qaeda attempt to do it. We've seen Russia do it. And what happens is that worm goes in and it changes the software. It reprograms the software. So that is an alteration of the system. Secondly, what this bill doesn't address is a situation in which the hardware of the system might be changed. Okay. And the example I would give there would be a situation where you'd have an EEPROM chip, for example, like with the environmental programming that's done in a car currently and the performance programming that's done in a car currently. There's a little chip that you can take out and you can order from Summit or one of these aftermarket car manufacturers a reprogrammed chip, and you can stick that chip back in the car and reprogram it. And they make it easy for you to defeat essentially the government regulations.
If you did that, you then modified the vehicle.
You have modified the vehicle.
Yeah, and so
But
the bill addresses that.
the question is whether, if the manufacturer makes it easy to do that, whether there should be a liability. For example,
All right, let me just suggest, if you've got some wording that you would like to propose to Senator Hancock, I would suggest you propose it to Senator Hancock. Okay.
I have one last question.
Yes, sir.
Just in terms of distinguishing, is there a difference in this bill between commercial and highway driving and urban neighborhood driving? Does this technology allow for these different environments differently? Does it treat them differently?
I don't see anything in the bill about that. I know that most of the experiments that have been done so far, that they're first trying to introduce this on highways because there's less inputs that the computer has to deal with, so that they can learn how to implement this technology. In a urban environment, a neighborhood environment, the inputs that are subjected to, like children, people running across the street, whatever the case may be, are more varied than, say, on an interstate highway. And this bill doesn't address that issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Howard?